everyone, and welcome back to Full Recovery. Thank you so much for tuning in, for watching. I'm truly humbled that many of you would take the time to watch these videos and then give me some feedback about them, how they've helped you, things that you'd like to hear in the future. I've enjoyed interacting with you so much in this way. Just a quick programming note. This is the last week that there will be 2 videos per week from now on. There will be 1 video per week, and they will air on Fridays. That will last for a while. I'm not sure what's going to happen beyond that, but for the foreseeable future, they will be once a week on Fridays. So I hope that you'll continue to watch these and interact, and I hope and pray that they are a blessing to you. I do pray. It's important for you to know that I do pray and ask God each time what He'd like for me to discuss here, and praying about who to interview and who to bring on to this channel and this platform to have them be an influence. I think it's important who we allow to influence our lives and the influence that we have for Jesus Christ. And so I don't want to jeopardize that in any way. And so I do make these episodes a matter of prayer, and I hope you do too. I hope you're praying that God will use these to be a blessing to many people, and ultimately people will come to know the Lord because maybe they came across this channel. I want to share a little life hack, a tip. Maybe some of you already know this, but I didn't know it until a couple of years ago. And I've shared it a few times at places I've been, so maybe you've heard me talk about it or seen it somewhere else. But if you haven't, this is going to be a life changer if you like to wear heels. Now, the older I get, I am leaning a little bit more towards comfort than I used to. My mom's grandmother, so my great-grandmother, used to say, "Suffer to be beautiful." And she would tell my mom that all the time. And so my mom always said that to me growing up when I didn't want my hair brushed or something like that. And so one day I was getting ready for a banquet, and our youngest daughter, Amanda, was on my lap, and I was doing her hair. And she was squirming and, oh. And I said, "Amanda, suffer to be beautiful." And she said, "Your great grandma said that, right?" And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "And she's dead now, right?" And I said, "Yes, she is. You have a point." But I don't like to suffer so much for beauty anymore. But when I do wear heels, which is usually no more than 3 inches at this point, most of the time I try to keep my heel height now around 2 inches. But it doesn't matter the height of the heel if you're in heels for several hours, maybe for church on Sunday or for a wedding or a formal event or something like that, or maybe you like to wear heels every day to work or something like that. If you're like me, you have a lot of foot pain with that. And my feet used to kill me, even with just a 3-inch heel. My feet would hurt after being in them for a little while. So I learned to take some pieces of paper tape, which you can get this at Walmart, CVS, anywhere, lots of places, grocery store, they all carry paper tape, and take some strips that are about just a few inches long and wrap the tape around your 3rd and 4th toes on both feet. So your middle toe there on your foot and the next to the last toe. And if you wrap those together, I don't know the science or I guess the biology behind it. Maybe somebody can explain that to me. But all I know is it does something to relieve foot pain or to keep them from hurting altogether. In fact, and the reason to use paper tape is that it's easy to remove. It won't stick, but it will hold your toes together. I don't know why it works. Maybe somebody can tell me that, but I do know that when I take the paper tape off from around my toes, I have no foot pain. I don't feel foot pain while my feet are in the shoes, while I'm wearing the shoes, or when I take the tape off. But it is amazing, and I know it's going to be something that's a blessing to you if you haven't heard of that before. If you've known our family for any length of time, then I'm sure you've heard some parts of this story before, but I want to tell you some circumstances that happened to us in 2010, and I won't tell all the details just for sake of time here, but in the summer of 2010, my husband had reserved a hotel room for us one night, and we were just going to go and get away as a family. It had been a very busy week, and we were just going to go spend one night along the ocean in Narragansett, Rhode Island. And we did that, and it was beautiful. We had just the room right on the water, and it was just lovely. Well, we walked along the beach there. We were the only ones there walking along the beach at night. In the morning, my husband and the kids went back to just spend a little bit of time in the water while I was in the room cleaning up and packing up. And I remember I was watching Wimbledon. And so they came back, and I noticed that my husband was leaving a trail of blood when he walked, just a little bit. And I said, did you hurt yourself in some way? Did you do something? And he said, no. And of course the water was cold still there. That's why there was nobody there besides us idiots. But he didn't know he had stepped on something, or he never felt anything. And the water, like I said, the water was very cold. And anyway, I cleaned it up and bandaged it up, and we sort of went on our way. And it wasn't too long before he became very ill, and just a lot of details going into that part of the story. But when we landed in the hospital, we did not realize how sick he was. Just so many horrific things had gone on in a 2-week span. And as it turns out, he had stepped on a sea urchin in the water there, and it left bacteria on the bones of his left foot. We went to the hospital, the emergency room, on a Monday evening. By the next morning, a doctor had come up. In fact, I think this is important that I tell this part of the story, but when you have a loved one in the hospital, in fact, that's one reason that things are so difficult right now with COVID-19 is that no one in the hospital can have someone there with them to advocate for them. But with my husband's case, they were talking about trying this treatment, doing that. We have a teaching hospital here. Danbury Hospital is a teaching hospital, and all that night and the next morning, there were just teams of doctors coming in, and they were all saying different things and having a different outlook. And at one point on Tuesday morning, they left the room, and I followed them out into the hallway there, and I said, I want to know who all of you answer to if something goes wrong with my husband. Who do you answer to if he dies? And they gave me the doctor's name, and it turns out it was the chief of infectious diseases here in our area. And so they told me his name, and I said, I would like for you to call him and ask him to come up and explain things to me, because I'm getting 30 different answers from all of you. And I am not a medical professional. And so I would like to hear from him how you're going to proceed and that you will follow it. If he's the one in charge, then he must be the most knowledgeable. So I'd like to speak with him. And do you know, within 15 minutes, he was up there. And he was the kindest, nicest man. His name is Dr. John Stratitis, and just a brilliant doctor. He actually brought me behind the nurse's station and pulled up my husband's pictures from his MRI and showed me the pictures there of my husband's bone in his left foot. And he asked me to look at that bone and tell him what I saw. And of course, with my untrained eye, what to look for, I just kind of said, well, I see that there's a lot of white here and there's a lot of dark here. And he said, yeah, that's what I see too. He said, that's what anybody would see looking at this picture. He said, what you don't know is the white part of the bone is good and healthy and strong. The dark part of the bone is infected and sick and weak. And then he looked at me and he actually took me by the hand, which doctors don't do. But he took me by the hand and he said, Mrs. Vasic, I know there's been some confusion here this morning and I'm sorry about that. But he said, really, we have about an hour and a half before your husband's condition is going to be beyond helping. We have about 90 minutes before there's not going to be anything we can do for him. And those were tough words to hear, because up until that point, I did not want to entertain my husband losing his foot. But Dr. Stratidis said to me that day, you cannot heal infected bone. It must be removed. Well, I hadn't heard that. I didn't know that. I thought you give somebody antibiotics, they get better. I didn't know there was even a difference between muscle infection and bone infection. But I got an education really quickly. And of course, I was put in touch with another doctor who seconded that opinion and said, yes, they need to do something really quickly. And I was so grateful for Dr. Dennis Streeter, who walked me through this also on the phone. But I learned that day that you're not going to heal that. It's going to have to be removed. My husband was septic because of that bone infection. And if we didn't do something quickly about that bone infection, he was going away. And there would be no hope to save him at all. And so I said to Dr. Stratidis, go tell him, go explain it. And he very kindly did. And of course, my husband in Joe's way just said, let's do it. Do it. You know, he just wanted to feel good again. They did remove half of his left foot at the time. And that did spare his life. But the next 10 years were a challenge. Just many trips to the emergency room, many crises with health issues, until last summer we made the decision to go ahead and remove his whole left foot. There was infection lurking somewhere, and even though his life wasn't threatened in that moment, it would have been, and we would have been back in the same position that we were in 2010. So since then, he's been great. He has a prosthetic, and life's been good health-wise for him. He's just handling life well, which we really haven't experienced so much in the previous decade. And so we're grateful for that. But something occurred to me pretty quickly after enduring all of that. And that was when I read this verse. The Bible says in Proverbs chapter 12 and verse 4, a virtuous woman is a crown to her husband, but she that maketh ashamed is as rottenness in his bones. I don't mean to be gross or sensational here today, but I have seen bone rot. I've seen what it can do to a healthy person. I've seen what it can do to a family because you're dealing with that infected bone. I've seen what it can do to knowledgeable people at a hospital trying to decide what to do about that infected bone. Bone rot is not a good thing. Bone rot is incurable. And something has to go when that occurs. And I'm not sitting here as a wife and mother saying the health of everybody in your family rests on us as women. But I can tell you what the Bible says is true. She that maketh ashamed is as rottenness in his bones. She that maketh ashamed to her children is as rottenness in their bones. She that maketh ashamed to her friends is as rottenness in their bones. She that maketh her co-workers ashamed is as rottenness in their bones. She that maketh her fellow church members ashamed is as rottenness in their bones. That's pretty heavy. And it's something that I don't think the vast majority of Christian women think about. The infections from sin and wrong thinking, and even things that have just happened to us, abuse, neglect, these things that we didn't ask for them, they just came our way. But if we don't realize that there is a Jesus who can heal them, they will remain centers of infection, which will cause rottenness in the bones of those we love. And I don't mean literal bone, although I do think a lot of illness is caused from stress, from the poor behavior of those that are surrounding us. But something in their lives will have to go. It might be, at the very least, a relationship with us will have to go. At most, I mean, I've known people who made drastic changes in their lives because of something, that a sore spot that just would not be healed that another person caused. A virtuous woman is a crown to her husband, the Bible says. But I would submit to you, a virtuous woman is a crown to all those that know her. But she that maketh if they will let her be. Sometimes, I mean, you know, we all know we're not going to be everybody's favorite. But those who know her and love her, she will be a crown to them. But she that maketh ashamed is as rottenness in fill in the blank in their bones. And we have to get beyond that. Our homes are going septic, and it's been happening for some time. I've talked about it often on this channel and places where I've been, in posts on social media. It's been very telling the last few years. The septic nature of homes of those in the ministry, those who claim to be pastors leading everyone, many of their homes, Christian leaders, many of their homes are not as they seem. Two of the most well-known female authors that people look to and are quoted often and resourced often, and their books and posts and blogs are shared by the thousands, their marriages have ended in divorce. Their homes have been broken within just the last year or two. I don't sit in judgment of people whose homes have been broken. I was raised in a broken home. My heart goes out to, I think if you know me, you know that to be the case. But I am saying that what has been revealed, the sepsis, the underlying infection that has been revealed, it's rotten. And no, I can't get inside every husband's mind. I can't get inside every wife's mind. I can't get inside my own mind many times. But I can say, hey, we as Christian women, we have to do better. And do you know you can live alone and your home can be septic? Now that's sad, but I've seen it happen. You can live alone and be septic. But we have to do better than this. We have to get to the place where first we recognize what has gone on and we have to make the steps necessary to make a change. I don't know about you, but my family enjoys breakfast food for dinner. And we have that quite a bit. We have pancakes or waffles or omelets or things like that. We enjoy it. I know a lot of people don't, but we like breakfast food in general and could eat it all day. In fact, many times if we'll go to a restaurant that serves breakfast all day, that's what many of us will get because we enjoy it. Well, one night I was making French toast and bacon for my family, and we got to the table and something tasted funny. I mean, not funny, it was awful. And I couldn't eat it. I threw mine in the trash, which I hate to do that, but it was so bad. I threw it in the trash. I said to my husband, I'm going to make myself some eggs. Anybody else want something different? This is not tasting good. And my husband is always very easygoing with food. And he was like, no, this is great. And you know, trying to force it down. But I couldn't put my finger on what the problem was because I had made the French toast like normal. It had lots of butter and syrup on it, and I just couldn't figure out what went wrong. But I didn't eat it. I threw mine away. Well, a couple weeks later, I'm making actual breakfast on, I believe it was a Saturday morning, and I reached up in the cabinet quickly, and I pulled the cinnamon out of the cabinet, and I went to pour it in the bowl, and I realized, oh no, I have nutmeg. And I'm like, oh goodness, okay, that's not good. So I put it back in the cabinet, got out the cinnamon, and then it hit me. That's what I did a couple of weeks before. I made French toast with nutmeg. And I was like, no wonder it actually tasted like tree bark. It was the nastiest. And so I pulled out the cinnamon, finished making the French toast, and that time it was good. And of course we all had a good laugh when I told my family I finally realized what I had done and why I threw my French toast in the trash. But you know, this is indicative of Christian homes today. We want our homes to look and taste like they're supposed to taste and to appear like it's supposed to appear, but we are making them with the wrong ingredients. My husband would say everybody wants the product, but very few want the process. We have to get back to the place where the Bible is our guide, the Holy Spirit is our teacher, we have a close relationship with God, and our homes are transformed by the saving, keeping power of Jesus Christ. That was very telling to me as I realized that it was an accident. I just wasn't thinking, grabbed the wrong ingredient. And, you know, it's kind of funny to think about that, but it's not funny when it happens in Christian homes. Nothing that we consider wrong about America was accepted until our homes went septic. I have wondered many times, especially in recent days, when you're looking out at these riots and things that are happening, and you just wonder, where are the dads? Where are the moms? We are not teaching our children. We are not responsible for our children. And we just all think that this is normal now. And I understand, even in Christianity, there's a thought that, you know, we don't want church to go back to the 50s. We don't want that lifestyle. And I know the Leave It to Beaver, you watch those episodes now and they just seem ridiculous. And, but you know, not everything about that time was bad or goofy. there were some things that were going on that were pretty good in homes. There were, not everybody, but there was a stability in America because dad was in the home, mom was in the home, and things went well. Not every home was godly, not every home had great character, but the vast majority of homes were intact. In fact, even in 1980, when my parents divorced, I didn't know another person around us, another family around us that was broken. We were the only ones. And yes, that contributed to much of the hurt I experienced as a kid. But I look back at all those homes and I'm like, man, how did ours get broken so easily when it wasn't a thing? But we accept it now because it's just normal. There's a deeper level, a second level of abuse going on in our homes that is making our homes go septic. We have all kinds of homes that look great on the outside, but the inside is full of corruption. I want to just read you a list of some of the circumstances that I've dealt with. And these are all, for the most part, young people who have described certain circumstances to me that I'm going to read you. I'll tell you up front, some of them are very difficult to hear. And again, I'm not telling you this for a sensational factor, but everything that I'm going to read to you right here happened in a Christian home. Think about that while I'm reading this. This is not a movie script. This is not some crazy, story somewhere in a foreign country, a third world country. All of these circumstances happened in Christian homes with Christian people, supposedly Christian people. A girl came home to find her mother bloody, lying on the couch. This young girl thought her mother was dead. She was not. She had just sliced herself all over with tiny cuts, doing that to get a reaction out of her kids when they came home. Another girl came home to find her mother in bed with another man. A brother and sister chained together in a closet. A young man molested repeatedly by an uncle in his grandparents' home. When he told his parents, they said he had to be mistaken. A girl whose father took the lock off of her bedroom door so her brothers could have their way with her. A girl whose stepmother repeatedly invited a man over to their house, even though she knew the man molested her stepdaughter every single time. And I have others. I won't take the time to read through the entire list, but these stories are so offensive, so egregious, that it's clear these things are harmful to their homes and their children. We listen to these stories and feel complete disgust because we would say, well, that's not going on in my home or in the home of anybody I would know. We would say, oh, we'd never be guilty of that. But there's other ways to abuse besides cutting yourself to get a reaction or threatening to kill yourself, as many young people have to deal with. Threatening to leave. Believe it or not, I've seen kids grow up in the kinds of dysfunction that I mentioned previously and go on to have wonderful lives and functioning families. Why? Because the infection is obvious and they remove themselves from that situation so that they can be healed. The wrong ingredients are obvious because they scream at them day in and day out. They know what has to be removed. The most difficult circumstances to overcome are those that are not glaringly bad. The infection is there, but it's not showing symptoms to the outside world. It's what I would refer to as second level abuse or septic abuse. These are statements that I've heard where I've engaged a and someone who was hurting that told me about these things. Some of these you would even say, oh, come on. But let yourself process what you would do or what you would think if this happened to you. An adult in this person's life says, I love you because I have to, but I don't like you very much. If you were anybody else's child, I would hate you, but because you're mine, I have to put up with you. After a third grade girl told her mother that a boy in class called her a loser, the mother took every failure opportunity as she was growing up to remind her daughter that that boy in third grade was right. She was just a loser. Think about how that would affect you mentally, emotionally, spiritually through the years. Every time your mom bringing you back to the age of 8, reminding you that a boy told you were a loser. Moms threatening repeatedly to leave their families and blaming the children as the cause. That happens. That happens more than I care to even think about. A mother telling her daughter, if you weren't so fat, I wouldn't be ashamed for people to know you're my child. Parents threatening suicide and blaming their kids. Demanding perfection, and when the child can't deliver, they are humiliated. This one just gets me. Slapping across the face. You won't do anything more humiliating to a child than slap them across the face. I'm sorry, that's abuse. That's not a second level of abuse. In my book, that's actual abuse. This is probably the most committed second level or septic abuse. Getting in the car after church and immediately chewing up and spitting out the adults that your kids love. It is very hard for a child to think about the relationships that they have with people at church, their pastor, their youth pastor, their Sunday school teacher, or in the Christian school, a teacher, a coach at school. We want our kids to have good, healthy, strong relationships with those people. And yet we will not hesitate to chew that person up and spit them out if they jeopardize our security in our relationship with our child. And then our child is left to sit there going, but I love that person. I think they're pretty great, but my parents think they're awful. So how do I justify this? It's a second level or second tier or septic abuse. I want to put a picture here right now that a young man posted on social media years ago. And when I saw it, the caption broke my heart. But the caption said, I totally identify with this. Now, as you look at the picture, you see a woman, and she's sort of screaming down words at her child. And the child is trying to fend them off. But probably looking at that picture even right now is stirring up emotions in you. If you've ever had that second level of abuse. The screaming, the tension, the stress, the just the evil that takes place in our Christian homes. I will never forget talking with a young girl one day whose father was an angry, drunk, abusive, came home, just did all kinds of damage to their house, to them, was just a complete alcoholic, and yet he was a deacon in their church. They felt they couldn't tell anyone. They felt they had no recourse. It's a level of abuse that isn't public, that isn't, she felt like she couldn't tell anybody that for a long, long time. That's that second level of abuse. And I know you're sitting there going, that's not me. That's not my home. Do you criticize those that your kids love, let me tell you, the greatest level of abuse that goes on in the pews of our churches every week. You will take your family to sit in a church service listening to a man give to you what he has gotten from the Lord in his own personal Bible study and reading that week and prayer. And you will sit there week after week by your presence affirming that man and affirming what he's saying and affirming his position. But then you will get in your car or go home over dinner and rake that man over the coals. Now you may think, I'm just setting my kids straight. But when you're in the position of someone who deals with the hurts of young people, you find out pretty quickly you haven't created the atmosphere you thought you were gonna. What you have created in your child is a schizophrenic processing of, my parents for years validate this man with their presence, and yet they don't want me to validate him with mine. They don't want me to support him. And we always want to blame the church when the kids walk out after high school. But without exception, every young person that I have spoken to or that has come to me, I have asked, question number one, what did your parents say about your church at home? Without exception, my parents were incredibly critical, or my dad or my mom, one or the other. But they were incredibly critical. But I watched them week after week sit there and yet rip it apart when we got home. And I would sit there and think, obviously, this is a waste of all of our time. Now I know, I can hear it already. Some of you are like, yeah, but there's corruption on the other side too. Oh yeah, there is. And believe you me, it's being dealt with. God has dealt with it, is dealing with it. And ultimately one day, boy, everything we've all done is going to be dealt with. And of course, if you know Jesus as your Savior, even that sin is covered. But God keeps the books. Don't make any mistake about that. God keeps the books on that. But we wonder why our kids are leaving the church. 4 out of 9 of my pastors as a young person was immoral. When I was a young person, they were immoral. They had to leave our church. 4 out of 9. And the reason I had 9 is because 4 of them had to be replaced. And that was a lot to handle. You know, it proved their homes were septic. Their relationship with God was septic. But because I had a mom who was not, I was able to overcome those hang-ups and be the person that I'm trying to become today. God helping me. The spirit of a man will sustain his infirmity, but a wounded spirit who can bear? You know, it's amazing when you think about the reasoning behind why we don't get the help that we need. Many times we don't get the help that we need simply because we don't think our situation is that bad. We just don't think our home is that bad. We're not axe murderers. We're not drug addicts. We're not physically abusive. We're not molesting children, trafficking children. And so we don't think we're that bad. But I'm telling you, that infection that is there that makes our homes go septic is as bad as it gets. We don't get help because we're ministry experts. We do the helping. So we don't need to be helped. Years ago, I tried to talk with a lady who was a friend of mine, but also a mentor. But I tried to talk with her about something that I saw was a glaring error. And it went in one ear and out the other. And I know that the perception was, I do the helping. I don't need help. And I asked God that day to please don't ever let me get that outlook. I will always need help. I will always need His help. And I will always need the help from someone who's been a bit further down the road than me. I can even get help from younger people. I can't shut myself off as, well, I'm the expert in this and everybody's got to do it like I do it. No, in fact, I've said this many times on this channel. My husband, this has been our philosophy in raising our kids and in having our church. You could do things the way we do it and be very happy, but you don't have to. You can do something completely opposite. You can choose to do things, some things the same, some things different, but you could do it and you'd be happy. But if we're going to say that, our life has to back that up. And we are happy. We are not perfect. We have made our share of mistakes, but we are happy together. And we have tried to get that sepsis out of our home. How do you keep your homes from going septic? Preventing a septic home. Have a real connection with God. Do you pray in front of your children? Do you talk about the Bible? Does that make you nervous to even think about that prospect? Then there's sepsis in your home. Why? Because you're sitting in a pew every Sunday endorsing something that you don't live. Pray with your children. Talk about the scriptures with your children. Would your children describe you as spiritual? Would your children say, my mom is my greatest prayer warrior? I love that about Nancy Charbonneau's daughters, who both say, she is a prayer warrior for me. And if you haven't watched that video, go check it out where I interview her. But my mom was a prayer warrior for me. She was a spiritual lady, and I knew it. It was evident to me. Next, deal with your issues. The saddest thing that happens in this world is when a person decides to bring a new life into this world, having never dealt with their own emotional issues. I've told this, but it bears repeating. When our oldest daughter, Catherine, was born, I made her 3 promises. The first one is that I will do my absolute best to love her dad and keep him loving me. I won't be too proud to get the help that I need if I need it. And lastly, that I would not pass my baggage on to her. And I made those 3 promises to Joey and Amanda when they were born. And it is wonderful to experience young adult children who aren't held down by the baggage that I was. Next, keep your offenses small and say, I'm sorry. My mom taught me that, to keep your offenses small and let that bother you so badly that you don't engage in the egregious ones. Say, I'm sorry every time you offend. Is it difficult? Yes. Do you have to swallow your pride? Yes. But your kids need to know you're not a know-it-all. You can't teach a know-it-all anything. And if you are a know-it-all, as a parent, you will raise know-it-alls. And it is important to say, I'm sorry, and let them know that you know you were wrong. If you will rein yourself in, your family will cut you some slack when you need it. If you apologize, but continue to commit the same offense, you did not mean the apology, and they know it. A sincere apology equals changed behavior. You can't just keep apologizing by rote. It has to mean a changed behavior. Or it's insincere, it's plastic. Next, be the same on Monday as you are on Sunday. Live with as little hypocrisy as possible. The greatest feeling in the whole world, listen carefully to this, because again, I'm not being misperfect when I say this, but this is the truth. The greatest feeling in the whole world is listening to your pastor husband preach a sermon on the home and not squirming while you're listening. Are there things my husband preaches that provoke me to say, boy, I need to get better at that? Absolutely. But I have never sat in a church service where my husband, or anybody else for that matter, is teaching on the home and saying, oh, I wish my kids weren't hearing this right now. I've never had to squirm in a church service. Have there been things to add? Of course. But has there been any circumstance where I've listened to preaching going, you know, I'm going to have to get them home and correct that because they're going to think badly of me, or they're going to think I'm hypocritical? Not once. And my presence in that church pew endorses their dad, not just as their dad, not just as my husband, but as our pastor. And no, we don't go home and chew them up and spit them out. In fact, I would go so far to say, and I've had people tell me before, I don't believe you when you say that, and that's okay. I don't say things to be believed. I say things because this is what has helped me overcome my own dysfunctional home as a kid. But my kids have never heard me say anything critical about their dad. But I will say this, my mom never engaged in that, and my dad was not the greatest. Even after he left her, I didn't hear my mom criticize my dad or rip him apart. She knew I needed to still have some shred of being able to think about him in a good way. Now, how much more should I have that philosophy? Do my husband and I have disagreements? You bet. Of course we do. We are two different people. But I'm not going to get my kids in the car after church and say, now, Dad went a little crazy with that. We're not really going to keep that. No, because they deserve a chance to have a happy, healthy home too. But when you sit there and endorse what the pastor is saying with your presence and then get home and rip them apart, you are telling your own children, you don't have to sit in a pew like that when you can make up your own mind about whether or not to go. In fact, I'm pretty much guaranteeing you won't sit there and endorse that by your presence. Next, don't expect your children to just get over something. If I had $1 for every adult that told me in my youth, come on now, just get over that, I'd have a lot of dollars. Sometimes it's impossible to just get over something. Sometimes you just have to learn, God helping you, how to go around it. And it sort of stays there for a while and lingers, and you just go around it. But don't expect your own children to just get over your offense to them. You have to facilitate the process. I've never understood why, when people make an apology, they just think that's an end-all be-all to fixing and healing a circumstance. No, you're just getting started. That one little apology means very little. The person you've offended needs to see a life changed, an action changed. And you may have to facilitate someone's forgiveness. And I would say, in the case of your children, in the case of my children, we have to facilitate that forgiveness entirely. That might mean multiple apologies. That might mean smoothing over circumstances many times. That might mean eating a lot of crow before that relationship is healed. But what we've done is our pride is so strong and rules our lives in such a huge way that we can't even bring ourselves to say the first I'm sorry, much less think, well, I said I'm sorry, what more do they want? They want a little more I'm sorries. They want a little more action that indicates a different kind of behavior. And shame on us as the adults if we're not willing to facilitate that forgiveness. It's really difficult for me when engaging with young people from a broken home, what they have to deal with. There are some blended families where everything works great, and that's wonderful. But there are some where the young person is made to treat people like family that are awful to them. And the child or the young person knows in their mind, I should have never even had to meet these people. But now they're a part of my life and you want me to make them my family? And when that mom, and again, I'm talking to ladies here, so cut me some slack on that. I'm not talking to fathers, I'm talking to moms. But when you bring in a whole new dynamic to your child's life, and many times that dynamic is not good, but you demand that your child treats that person like family, that is a septic situation that you have brewing. And then we wonder why those who grow up in broken homes many times will repeat it. And we wonder why we have such dysfunction and we have such yelling and screaming, slamming doors, throwing things in our homes. Our children know their lives were never supposed to go that way. And yet they have to act like everything's hunky-dory. They have 2 toothbrushes, 2 bedrooms, 2 backpacks, 2 sets of rules, 2 sets of families. In many cases, kids are going to 4 or 5 or 6 different family reunions. I saw an interview recently with one of Kris Jenner's sons, Kris Jenner, who became Caitlyn Jenner. And one of his sons, who is a Jenner, said that his home has been fractured so much that he personally has 5 branches of immediate family that he has to find a way to interact with. Is it any wonder as a society how corrupt we are? Is it any wonder that society is septic? Because our own homes are septic. So don't expect your children to just get over it. You got to facilitate that. Encourage your children. Don't be so intimidated or guilty that you can't give your children the validation that they need. Look, I know that if you're my age or older, we didn't grow up in a world where parents were touchy-feely. Parents didn't read books about encouraging children and helping children. I mean, there really weren't a lot of resources out there. I felt like the reason I had such a great mom is because of what she grew up in, and she decided there had to be a better way to live. But that was even before she knew the Lord. And once Jesus came into her life, she was already a young wife and mother, but it drastically changed her life and changed who she was. And by the time I came along, she had a pretty good grip on a spiritual walk. But I cut a lot of slack for parents from previous generations because they really didn't have a lot of focus on that. They really just thought, let's keep this child neat and clean and safe and provided for, and we've done our job. But let me point out something here to those of you who are my age or younger. We do know now. We do have resources. We do have the Bible that should be a part of our everyday routine, and it should have an effect in our life and our home and how we care for our kids. We do have people who are willing to talk about things that previous generations weren't willing to talk about. So now there is no excuse for us. We need to be willing to encourage our children. Can I tell you something? I have always loved singing. I've always loved music. All three of our children sing better than I do. And you know what? I don't look at those kids as they were growing up saying, oh, if I keep pushing them, they're going to be better than me. No, I kept pushing them and encouraging them because I wanted them to be better than I am. My kids are smart. When I was a student, I fancied myself to be above average. My kids blow me out of the water with what they can do and what they can process. I'm glad for that. My husband would say the same thing. We're glad that they are leagues beyond where we were. That means we've done our jobs well. We have encouraged them well. And we're grateful for that. Don't be so insecure that you've got to take your child down a peg or two. You know, there is a story about the crab bucket and how a man was catching crabs on a line one day, and he kept just taking them, bringing them up and putting them in the bucket. And a young man walked by and said, "There's no lid on that bucket." And the older man said, "I don't have to have a lid on it because they'll just keep pulling each other down in the crab bucket." And it's true. In life, many times our homes are nothing but crab buckets where all we know to do is just keep pulling them down. Our kids get a little bit above us and we have to yank them back down. And it's not just, by the way, knocking their achievements. It's the yelling, the screaming, the fighting, the tension, and we pull them back down to that. And we wonder why they're in their rooms all the time or spending time at other people's homes all the time. It's the crab bucket mentality. We have to get over that as Christian women. We have a lot of people today who are functioning addicts. And I don't just mean drug addicts. You know, you can be addicted to anger. You can be addicted to rage. You can be addicted to hate. You can be addicted to negativity. You can be addicted to that septic atmosphere where you can't live if you're not in a crisis mode all the time or making a crisis. And that's no way to live. Don't be a functioning addict, because the truth is that has you in its grips, and it is just as evident as somebody who's addicted to heroin. You've got the marks. You don't realize it. You think you're doing pretty good. You think you're functioning, but you're not. And worst of all, your family knows it. So we've got to get the victory over those things. Lastly, beg God for mercy every day. My husband and I have often heard people say, "I don't know what went wrong. I did everything right. I don't know what went wrong with my child. I did everything right." May I submit to you, no parent does everything right. That's a very prideful thing to say. I know what parents mean when they say that. They say, you know, I took them to church. I loved them. I cared for them. I did all these things. But if we would take an honest look at who we are as people, maybe we passed baggage onto them that they just couldn't handle. Maybe we allowed things in our homes or in our lives that shouldn't have been there. Maybe it's just something that Satan saw as an open door, and he took that opportunity to infiltrate, and he came in, and now he has the victory in their lives. But no parent does everything right. The number one thing that my husband did from the time we found out we were having our first baby, we begged God for mercy to make up for our lack and for His wisdom to help us navigate. Childbearing is the hardest thing anybody ever does. It's difficult. It's difficult because nothing ever stays the same. The child is constantly growing. You're not the same as when you started. The older you get, life looks different. And we have to have God's wisdom if it's going to be done right. If you're going to have happiness in your home. If you're going to have a home that is infection-free. We're all people. We are all human. But that is not an excuse for a septic home. God will help. But we have to ask for it. We can't just fly by the seat of our pants about every circumstance that comes up. But we have to stay connected to Him and know that He will guide us. A virtuous woman is a crown to her husband, her children, her parents, her siblings, her co-workers, her church members, her students, her friends. But she that maketh ashamed is as rottenness in their bones. I pray today that this video, I know the subject matter has been harsh, but I pray that as we process the scripture and maybe some of the light that was shed on it in this video, I pray that we'll come to an understanding that we want healthy, happy homes. Even if we're by ourselves, we need a healthy, happy home so that that sepsis does not take over and it becomes beyond repair. Thank you so much for watching.